So, some of the differences between DNA and RNA come down to their structure. DNA has a double helix structure, and that's the name of a shape, just like the word triangle or the word sphere. These are shapes. Double helix is actually a shape, and this is the shape of DNA. It's made of two of these single strands here, and this makes one single double helix. However, RNA has a single strand structure like this. So that's one of the first differences. DNA and RNA are like the blueprints for proteins. In fact, if I asked you in class, what is the job of DNA? You could say something simple, which is DNA gives instructions for making proteins. That's the most important job of DNA. That's what a gene is. A gene is a set of instructions to make a protein. So, for example, if we look at this DNA here, now, some people think that DNA is all genes, but actually genes are just a small part of the DNA. So here is a single gene located on this big DNA molecule. And through a process called transcription, we can turn this gene message, which remember, a gene is instructions for making a protein. We can turn this into an RNA message. That's through transcription. And then that RNA message can actually be translated into a protein through a process called translation. So, what does a gene do? A gene gives instructions for making a protein. First, those instructions have to be transcribed into RNA, and next, that RNA has to be translated into the protein, like this. So, we will talk a lot more about DNA in this class. In fact, I believe chapter 10 is all about DNA, but we'll talk about DNA a little bit in every single unit. 3.15 talks about some of the differences and similarities between DNA and RNA, but I'm just going to tell you a few that I think are important. First of all, their structure is different. DNA is double helix, RNA is single helix. Second of all, their sugar is different. DNA has deoxyribose and RNA has ribose. And next, their functions are different, of course. So there's one last difference that we're going to look at later when we start learning about genetics. But part of a nucleotide is something called the nitrogenous base. And if we look at a nitrogenous base, that is this part of the nucleotide here, so phosphate group and the sugar in the nitrogenous base, DNA has four different nitrogenous bases: A, T, C, G, adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine. RNA actually does not have thymine, rather, RNA has a nitrogenous base called uracil. So, again, what are the differences? The shape is different, double helix versus single helix. The nitrogenous base is different, T versus U. And the sugar is different, deoxyribose versus ribose. Those are three of the most important physical differences between DNA and RNA. But of course, their function is also different. Section 316 is talking about a condition called lactose tolerance. And if you can drink milk without getting sick, congratulations, you are tolerant to lactose. And that's actually quite rare. Most people in the world are not tolerant to lactose. So, for most people in the world, if they drink milk, it makes them get sick. And the reason for that is because there's a special enzyme you need to make in your body to digest the lactose. But a lot of people can't make this enzyme. So, when they drink lactose, they get very sick. And that is it for chapter 3. I hope these videos were helpful for you. And I think that if you watch these videos more than once, that can also be really helpful because they're going quite fast. But chapter 3 is all about biochem. And if you understand biochem very well, that can really help you for the rest of the course. But if you're struggling with the chemistry or the biochem, everything else is going to be hard. So make sure you really understand chapter 2 and chapter 3. It will really, really help you when we get to things like photosynthesis and genetics and even evolution. All right, great job.